Hello. Welcome back in the car. I have some more thoughts on a movie that you may be interested in, or may not be, depending on your proclivities. I was going to do this morning, however, I didn't have a great start to my day before I came into work. Completely unrelated, but I had a knock on the door from the RSPCA because one of my neighbours had shared some concern over my dog losing weight. So yeah, they came knocking on the door and wanted to see the dog, so I showed them the dog and explained that he had EPI. And if anyone's aware of EPI, it's or for anyone who's not aware of EPI, it's basically a condition with an animal's pancreas where it can't create the necessary enzymes to fully digest food and nutrients. So my dog's never going to be a chunky monkey. He's not he's not skinny. Even the guy from the RSPCA said he'd seen worse, but he was happy with his condition, and it was one of those. But it's still a little bit annoying when you get busybodies who don't know what they're talking about. Something that I've had to deal with for a while, actually, because he's 9 years old now, and like I say, he's a German Shepherd. He's not a big dog because of his condition, but he's not a small dog either. He's got a frame, but he looks lean. And that's purely down to his condition. So yeah, I explained all of this to the RSPCA, and he was satisfied and went about his business. But yeah, it's just a little bit annoying that you've got busybodies all around you. I suppose they're doing it in the best interest of the animal, but come and knock on the door. Do you know what I mean? Come and knock on the door, and I can explain that my animal has a condition that he's been living with for the past 5 years, and I have to supplement his food with pancreas that I get from an abattoir. Blend that up every day and put it on his food. It's not a nice job, but he seems to enjoy it, and that gives him sufficient enzymes to actually digest his food and absorb nutrients as he should do. So yeah, I was in a mood this morning, and I thought I'd put it off until I was driving home. So, haven't seen this at the cinema. I watched this on Netflix. It's Martin Scorsese's latest film, The Irishman, which it's 3.5 hours long, people. 3.5 hours long. Now, I haven't been able to watch this at the cinema. It's had a very, very limited release in cinemas. Barely enough so it can be considered for award season. There's some kind of regulation that states that films have to be exhibited theatrically for a certain amount of time in order for them to qualify for contention for certain awards. I believe it was released on like the 4th of November in the States at least, and it was then subsequently released on Netflix because it's a Netflix production yesterday on the 27th of November. So yeah, what to say about it aside from it's 3.5 hours long? It's a Scorsese film, so it's going to be high quality. It's a landmark film in a way because people are making a big deal of the cast that's involved. If you don't know, we've got Scorsese directing Robert De Niro, no surprise there. Joe Pesci, bit of a surprise there, and Al Pacino. All men in their 70s, I think. De Niro and Pesci are like 76, and Pacino 1979, and this film takes place over a period of like 50, 60 years, something like that. So there has been some digital trickery involved to digitally de-age those three guys, just like varying kind of like eras. Like one will be, you'll see De Niro in his 20s, and you'll see him in his 30s, then in his 60s, and then in his 80s. Same for kind of like Pesci and Pacino to a lesser extent, and it tells a story of kind of labour, union workers. Jimmy Hoffa is involved, and Robert De Niro is like a hitman for the mafia. And the framing of the film is very reminiscent of Goodfellas. So I kind of find it interesting that Scorsese came out recently and derided comic book films, and specifically Marvel films, for not being cinema and being more like theme rides. He said, do we really need to see the same film over and over again? It's kind of interesting now, because this, from my perspective, and I'm being nitpicky here, but the framework of how the film is actually told, with narration and flashbacks, etc., etc. He's essentially remade Goodfellas for the third time with this film. Goodfellas is like 2.5 hours long. Wolf of Wall Street, I consider very Goodfellas-esque. It is a remake of Goodfellas, but with the story of Jordan Belfort. And this one is, Goodfellas, but with the story of Frank Sheehan, who claimed that he killed Jimmy Hoffa in a book, which is, after I did a little bit of research or light reading after watching the film, which I did in 2 segments. I watched kind of like the first third of the film yesterday morning before I went to work, and then I watched the second, or the last 2/3 of the film last night when I finished work and got in. So I finished watching the film at around about, it's cold, it's 2 degrees, temperature's just coming down. I finished watching the film around about 1:30 in the morning, and I'm not gonna lie, the length of the film I found a bit of an issue, especially towards the final third of the film. I felt myself nodding at it. Granted, it was late, it's after midnight, I've put a full shift in and blah 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 blah, but I really did feel the length of the film. I may revisit it and watch it, or attempt to watch it in all one go, but for me it's, like I say, Scorsese, he can make a good film in his sleep. He really can. He's one of cinema's great storytellers, one of the great directors of all time. He's kind of gone back to the well, like I said before, with using the framework of Goodfellas. We've got a story told in flashback with copious amounts of narration. Actually, the narration takes a back seat, actually, because it starts with Robert De Niro narrating the film, very much like Ray Liotta narrated the opening of Goodfellas, as the camera swings through like this nursing home, this care home, onto this old chap who we actually find out is him, and he's not talking to the camera to begin with. The narration is like over, and then we cut away from him to another scene, and then we come back to him, and then he's actually looking directly at the camera, breaking the fourth wall, speaking to you, and actually doing the voiceover of the film. So you've got those fourth wall breaks where your main character is telling the story directly to you as a member of the audience, the same way as that happened in Goodfellas as well. Yeah, there is more than a hint of irony that Martin Scorsese, who derided Marvel films for being the same film over and over again, and akin to theme park, has essentially delivered us Goodfellas for the third time. He's just tacked an extra hour onto it, which I found a bit of a slog, to be honest. However, the film is expertly crafted. It really is. The direction is sharp, the editing's tight. Obviously the story isn't, so tight. It feels a little bit overindulgent in this day and age to actually, release a 3.5 hour movie. I'm not sure how I would have fared in the cinema without an intermission or something like that. I am getting on in years now, so I'd probably need a toilet break. But it is literally, there's nothing technically bad to say about this film. It's handled by a master at the end of the day. Scorsese really is a master of his craft at this point. That said, I do feel it's a little bit overindulgent, just purely down to the length. It could have been a little bit tighter. There's some things in there that, it's the same as Tarantino. The issues I had with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I wanted to call it Once Upon a Time in America. It felt that someone should have been there to say, actually, yeah, we could probably trim, 30 seconds off here, or take a minute of this out of there, and just kind of like trim the story down. It didn't really need to be 3.5 hours in my view, just because we're dealing with a film that takes place over multiple decades and, a couple of generations. Doesn't mean that the film actually has to take place in that length of time either. The acting is all absolutely superb. It's top draw stuff. De Niro is fantastic. Pesci, it's good to see Pesci back. This is probably because he came out of retirement to actually do this film. I know he turned it down several times before actually caving and accepting the role and saying he'd step in. And Pacino being his shouty best as Jimmy Hoffa. So the CG for the digital de-aging stuff, which again, a little bit of irony. This is kind of technology that has been, kind of like championed and pushed forward through the Marvel films predominantly. I know, Gemini Man, and there's been a handful of other films where they're playing with kind of like, de-aging and all that kind of stuff. But let's be honest here. It has been the Marvel films that's kind of pushed this technology to the point of, being as good as what it is, through the necessity of actually, having films set in the 60s with, a younger Hank Pym, and then showing a younger Robert Downey Jr. in Civil War, all that kind of stuff. So again, for Scorsese to say that, those films are not cinema, but be quite happy to actually, use techniques that are well kind of established, and have been kind of, championed and pushed forward by the Marvel films. Again, it's a little bit, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, okay, so it's weird. It really is weird, because in the Marvel films where someone's been de-aged, it's usually been for a shot or two. It's never been sustained very long, and to sustain this over 3.5 hours and have multiple iterations of someone's, aging throughout the. I'll be honest, I found it a little bit kind of confusing at certain points, because as good as it is in some scenes, in others it's not terrible, but there's still clearly limitations to the technology, and I think that's probably down to the actual extreme age of the main three guys that you're actually trying to de-age here. Because like I said, they're all in the 70s, and Pacino's knocking on the door of 80. He actually comes off the best out of the three, I would say, in terms of like how consistent all of the de-aging makeup is for Pacino. His is the most consistent, and I had little trouble actually, believing that it was legit, and it looked right. There's shots with De Niro, however, which they look fine until he moves, and then it looks a little bit weird. There's some scenes where he looks kind of like chubby around the face. He looks kind of a little bit bloated, and the same for Pesci. He's got some very predominant wrinkles in his forehead, which, depending on the shot in the scene, are either there or they're not. And it got to the point in the early stages of the film, the first third, I'd say the first half actually, it got to the point, because the narrative is jumping around in time, and it's not really giving you any signal as to when, in the timeline this scene takes place. You're going purely off the looks of the character. I got a little bit confused. I'm not well up on American history. I'm not well up on history in general, to be honest. And I know very little about the actual reality of this story. But I did get confused at some points about where, age-wise, our characters were supposed to be. So, that was a little bit annoying. Yeah. And some shots do have that kind of uncanny valley. You're looking at it and you're like, there's something not quite right. There's something. I mean, I know some people are saying, oh, it's, it settles down and you get used to it and blah, 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 blah. I didn't at any point. I couldn't get used to it. It was weird and jarring. And it was purely down to the inconsistency of some of the shots. But maybe that's just my eye. Maybe that is just my eye, because I remember watching Rogue One with one of my mates, and Peter Cushing has been digitally recreated in that, and I turned to him at the end of the film. I said, what did you make of the old fella, Grand Moff Tarkin, his character? And he was like, yeah, he was alright. I said, he's dead. He's been dead like 20 odd years. He was like, all right, okay. And he didn't know. And I've got a feeling that if you are kind of naive to that, then the film will get a pass off you. If you're a little bit, but I don't know. It was just, maybe I'm more critical because I've watched more films and I know how old De Niro is. I know what he looks like nowadays. Same for Pesci and Pacino. And I just know subconsciously that's not what they look like. So I was always kind of like in my head picking it to pieces. So yeah, you're either going to get on with that or you're not. But that's not to say that it kind of hurts the film in any way, because the rest of the film technically is just so well put together, length aside, that you're either going to forgive it or you're not. You're on board with it or you're not. So it's an interesting exercise. I think in a couple more years it is going to be literally something that you're not going to be able to tell the difference between. So yeah, it's a very good film. If you like Goodfellas, you're probably going to enjoy this. I would probably recommend watching it over 2 viewings, because 3.5 hours, it's a big ask for anyone, to be fair. But yeah, it's a Scorsese film. What's not to like? It is a weird way that the film cost 160 million. 160 million. That's predominantly, a lot of that money went onto all of the effects for the cast, but fuck me, I'll be surprised if that ever breaks even, because I don't think a lot of people are going to run out and get a Netflix subscription just to watch The Irishman. I honestly don't, and I don't think it's made a lot of money, and it's limited theatrical release. But it is what it is. I was shocked when I saw it was 160 million, because, well, it's just, that's a Marvel film. It is in this day and age now. So yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed the film overall. It's a very well, put together movie. All of Scorsese's typical kind of flair is there, and good soundtrack, and you have seen it before, and you've seen shorter, more concise versions of it. But if you, like I say, if you like that kind of stuff, if you like Goodfellas or Wolf of Wall Street and how those films and stories are told, then you probably like The Irishman. And a little bit bittersweet in the fact that it is probably Pesci's last ever time on screen. It's just a shame that it hasn't had a wider theatrical release, but there we have it. So, The Irishman. I'd recommend it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Discuss away, and hopefully the next film I watch will actually be in the cinema. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll be back soon with another review. Take care.